This video series is not going to be like many other commentaries on YouTube. It's not flashy, it doesn't have fancy animation, it's not concerned with politics or even Trump's personality. It's purely focused on the many facts about his retention of federal records. If you want to understand the case better based on the facts and the law, these videos will be a great starting point. There's a lot of misinformation about the case, even in the news, so the first two parts of this series provide basic facts about the nature of federal records and the rules that govern them. Parts 3 and 4 will delve more into Trump's specific case. You'll also notice the asterisk next to 4 parts. Depending on the questions and feedback I receive, the series could extend further. This first video begins with a brief reminder about the structure of our government, especially the system of checks and balances, since many of the issues relate to each branch. It will then explore the major categories of records and basic facts about classified information. Throughout this video and the others to come, you'll always see the sources at the bottom of the screen. Feel free to pause at any time to read quoted facts or access these sources. Occasionally, you'll also see this icon appear. This signifies an important point that will be referenced later in the series, so you may want to note it. Some basic civics reminders are a great place to start, since anyone who's watched street interviews on late-night TV knows that knowledge of our government is lacking, to say the least. At a very basic level, the legislative branch, or Congress, makes laws. The executive branch enforces those laws, and the judicial branch interprets the laws. Most importantly, they're equal. No single branch is considered more powerful than the rest, and the system of checks and balances is in place to ensure that that remains the case. Congress has multiple powers that it can use to impact the other branches, including by passing laws that impose certain requirements. For example, the Presidential Records Act was a law passed by Congress to govern how presidents manage their records. Similarly, the Ethics in Government Act of 1978 requires the Supreme Court justices to disclose certain aspects of their finances. Clearly, that didn't work as intended. The executive branch's powers include the ability of presidents to veto proposed laws or issue executive orders. As they're the ones who nominate Supreme Court justices, they can also select nominees who share their ideological beliefs, a power we've seen exercised multiple times over the past decade. It's important to remember, though, that the president's authority is not unlimited. Again, the principle the Constitution is built on is separate but equal. The judicial branch plays a critical role, as it decides whether the laws passed by the legislative branch and the actions taken by the executive branch are constitutional. Those decisions set precedents, which essentially means that the decisions become points of reference when similar cases arise in the future. Even their authority is not unlimited, though, as their successors can overturn decisions, just as we recently saw with Roe v. Wade. Remember this separate but equal doctrine as we go through the series, as the rules and issues surrounding the management of records cross each branch. As defined by law, federal records constitute any recorded information. While most people think of this as documents, it can actually take many other forms: audio and video recordings, graphics, charts, maps, even emails and notes. As long as the information concerns official duties of government employees, it's considered a record. As Trump's case and other high-profile cases concern the executive branch, we'll focus there. 2 laws currently govern records in that respect: the Federal Records Act and the more recent Presidential Records Act. Each applies only to types of records as defined by those laws. While the FRA is the governing statute for federal agencies, the PRA has a very narrow scope, as it's limited only to records within the executive office of the president. This is a critical point to keep in mind as we continue through the series. The FRA spans the entire government, applying to all agencies and departments with only a few exceptions. What you'll notice about those agencies and departments is that they span all 3 branches of the government, including the executive branch. For example, the CIA and FBI are within the executive branch, but they must follow the FRA statutes since their sole function is not to advise the president. However, Congress and members of the Supreme Court, since they're not agencies, are not required to do this. Both instead follow congressional laws and internal rules. The Presidential Records Act, passed 28 years after the FRA, governs any records within the executive office of the president. Again, note that the executive office components as defined by law don't include many agencies in the executive branch, such as the FBI, CIA, and Department of Defense, since those agencies don't exist solely to support and advise the president. The history and purpose of the PRA will be discussed later, but the important point to note now is that it creates clear guidance for how presidents manage their records. Everyone knows the term classified, but information that's considered classified includes only a small portion of government records. The vast majority are unclassified records, meaning they were never classified to begin with, or they're declassified, meaning they were classified at one time but no longer are. Classified information includes the type of records we hear about so often in the news, but as we'll explore later, there are many misunderstandings about classified records. There's also one more category that isn't commonly referenced: controlled unclassified information. This category includes information that's tightly controlled and not publicly available, but it's not necessarily classified. Certain types of national defense information may fall under the classified category or the controlled unclassified category, depending on its nature. However, regardless of which category it falls under, it's generally protected and it can't be disclosed. As already noted, records are defined as recorded information in whatever form that may take. That means, naturally, classified information can also take many forms. The types you see here are by no means exhaustive. People usually think of it as documents, since those are the records discussed in the news. However, photos can be considered classified, as can videos. Maps showing sensitive locations and military actions may be classified. Emails and other digital files are often classified, and even handwritten notes may be classified depending on the information that they contain. These definitions of classified information and all of the associated categories stem back to World War II, when knowledge of military resources and actions became just as important as our weapons and technology. While presidential directives were originally informal, the use of executive orders for this is now law, and presidents modify the orders of their predecessors, or just replace them entirely as needed. The most current version is Executive Order 13526, issued by Obama in 2009. No other order has been issued since that time. It's also important to consider that not all classified information is equal. Current law defines 3 levels: confidential, secret, and top secret, each differing based on the potential harm it could do if revealed or made public. The kinds of information that fall into each level can be very gray at times, but as an example, confidential may be individual reports or training documents. The secret level may be specific technologies or troop numbers. Information like specific battle plans, military intelligence, or scientific advances may be top secret. However, beyond those 3 levels of classification are 2 subcategories usually associated with top secret, but sometimes secret as well: sensitive compartmented information and special access programs. There are special restrictions that apply for information within these categories, including secret programs, military actions, and other very sensitive material. One of the most common misconceptions cited on forums and news comments is that only the president has the authority to classify information. That's entirely incorrect. Executive Order 13526 stipulates that the authority extends to other officials called original classification authorities, and they in turn can delegate this to others. OCA authority is applicable for 1 or more of the classification levels, and as of last year, a total of 1,678 individuals were delegated OCA authority. However, OCAs like the president, vice president, and agency heads very rarely use their authority to classify information. By far, the more common method is through derivative classification. This simply means classifying material by following set procedures based on the kind of information and the degree of harm it could do if revealed. Essentially, even though the individuals who do this have no classification authority on their own, they're the ones rubber stamping all but that tiny sliver of material on a day-to-day basis. Many people also mistakenly think that only the president can declassify information, which is incorrect as well. Executive Order 13526 outlines the processes for declassification, and all OCAs usually delegate that authority. There are 3 methods of declassification, and the first one is most common. If information no longer meets classification requirements when reviewed, it's declassified, almost always by someone delegated that authority rather than an OCA. The second method is automatic, in line with regulations stipulating that classified information becomes declassified after a 25-year period, even if it may do potential harm. However, this can be overturned under certain circumstances. The third type of declassification, which rarely occurs, concerns information that could also do harm by being revealed, but an OCA makes the decision to declassify it if the public's right to know is the more important concern. On top of these regulations and processes, there's another system for certain types of information related to nuclear secrets. Any material classified under the Atomic Energy Act, passed by Congress in 1954, can only be declassified by following the specific procedures laid out in that statute. Records with this type of classified information can include highly sensitive material related to the development of nuclear weapons. This is a long-standing law that even the president is subject to. Remember the nature of checks and balances. Congress passed this law, and the executive branch must follow it. All of this raises the question of who can access classified information, and how are they granted that ability? The first method for the vast majority of government employees is through the security clearance process, managed by the executive branch. This is likely what most people imagine when thinking about the topic, undergoing a set process that results in receiving a security credential. However, certain government officials automatically receive access to classified information by virtue of their positions. There are certain steps that they're required to take, such as an oath of non-disclosure, but they're not required to receive security clearances. This does include the President, the Vice President, and members of Congress. The most recently publicly available data shows that 1.7 million people, from government employees and contractors to scientists and other professionals, have active clearances for the confidential and secret levels, and 1.25 million have clearance for the top secret level, for a total of approximately 3 million people who access classified information for their work. Another 1.2 million beyond this have approved clearances, but are not actively using them. The other key point about this figure is that in most cases, especially at the top secret level, the types of information that they can access are limited on a need-to-know basis. It would be easy to assume that all classified information is highly guarded, but that's not necessarily the case. Most physical material, even at the top secret level, only needs to be kept in a secure storage location or a safe. The exception is for information with special designations, which must be stored in a sensitive compartmented information facility or SCIF. In the case of a special access program, that would be an SAPF. Similarly, there's no special requirement for removing classified material from those storage spaces when being used. Again, the assumption is that top secret information would be closely tracked, but only material stored in a SCIF or an SAPF is typically tracked. Finally, classified information can even be sent through the U.S. Postal Service depending on the level of classification. Only top secret and SCI or SAP material requires a courier service, and that courier is the one charged with managing the chain of custody. The role of SCIFs in Trump's case, as well as other cases, is often cited. Again, there are many misconceptions about them, and they're not always rooms that resemble a guarded fortress. They can look different depending on the needs of the users, the location, and whether they're permanent or temporary. The Situation Room in the White House is a well-known SCIF, but others include entire buildings, groups of rooms, and even small rooms no larger than a closet. As you can imagine, the total number of SCIFs is far higher than most people would think, over 10,000 in total, with most located in federal government facilities. The commonality between them is always the same: the security measures used to ensure that the spaces are protected from physical and digital intrusion, and they all must be accredited. Though SCIFs are most commonly found in federal buildings, they can be and are created in other locations, as long as they meet the required standards. Every president and vice president maintains SCIFs in their homes, as do other officials such as the Secretary of State and even some senators. The home pictured here, located just outside of Washington, D.C., contains a SCIF, but the owner isn't even a government employee. He's an executive for a military contractor, and he needed the SCIF to be able to discuss and review top secret information at home. Simply put, many of the beliefs people have about the nature of SCIFs simply doesn't reflect the reality. This brings us to the end of the first part of the series. At this point, you may want to pause and absorb some of the key facts surrounding both federal records and classified information, as well as some of the sources that were cited. In particular, Executive Order 13526 and the Congressional Research Service report shown at the bottom are highly valuable resources as a starting point in understanding classified information. If you found this video valuable, please do like and share it, and consider subscribing. I'd certainly make more videos on this and related topics if there's interest. I'll see you in part 2 of the series very soon.